According to Women in Hollywood, a site that aggregates statistics related to the representation of women both on-screen and behind the camera in the Hollywood film industry, in the top 100 grossing films of 2019, 66% of speaking or named characters were male and 34% were female. Only 28% of all speaking characters in action films were girls and women. These numbers are pretty abysmal to begin with, but they also don't fully delve into the quality of representation for women characters in a story. Men are more likely to be hired as directors for these major feature films, and they are more likely to have male leads in their stories. Let's have a brief introduction to auteur theory. Auteur is the French word for author, as the theory was largely pioneered by French director François Truffaut, who was dissatisfied with the state of French cinema and honed in on certain American directors whom he considered to be the prime examples of a better model of the filmmaking process. Famed film critic Andrew Sarris would eventually pen the official definition of an auteur, which is a filmmaker whose individual style and complete control over all elements of production give a film its personal and unique stamp. Zack Snyder is absolutely an auteur. At a first glance, you can observe his distinct visual style across his body of work, but upon closer observation and analysis of his women characters, you can also start to extrapolate some key elements about his values and views towards women. This video will examine three main sections of how the women in Zack Snyder's filmography are characterized. Zack Snyder's filmography is full of strong, powerful women. And I don't use the word strong in a superficial sense. I mean it in the sense of their strength of character. They are three-dimensional beings, not cold, domineering archetypes. Even when the women characters are physically strong and can fight, that is not all that defines them. They persevere through adversity, and traits like empathy and compassion are just as important to defining their strength of character. We see time and time again that in Zack Snyder's fiction, male leads are in awe of the women they love and respect.
A miracle.
In Zack Snyder's debut feature film, Dawn of the Dead, the main character is Anna Clark. Anna is the first main character that we meet, and she is the one we follow through the horrific discovery that the world is succumbing to a zombie apocalypse. Our emotional investment in the story remains intertwined with her feelings and well-being. She is smart, a caretaker, and despite not coming from a background that involves fighting or weapons expertise, she holds her own in the fight for survival. The final girl is a trope in the horror genre referring to the last girl or woman who survives after everyone else has died, at which point she will usually confront the killer. Despite the stinger scene in the film's credits, which reveals that none of these people have survived, Anna can still loosely fit the final girl role since she is ultimately the lead character that the narrative stays with, and she survives longer than many of the other lead characters in the ensemble.
I want to know, though, because I keep seeing this in print and it offends me. Why do they keep saying women are not going to see this movie? It's too violent.
I never said that.
Why does everybody? I have no idea. I love the film and I'm a woman, so.
Yeah.
Zack Snyder and Deborah Snyder have been married since 2004, and Deborah has been a producer on all of Zack's projects from 300 onward.
He loves powerful women, and I think he's always really conscious about surrounding himself by powerful women, you know, whether it's behind the camera on set or also whenever he's writing. Like Gorgo was, I think, a couple frames. It might have even been 2 or 3 frames in Frank Miller's graphic novel, and she had her own storyline. We talked a lot about how it was just as important that they were equals. Even when we talked about Lois, we talked about it can't be just Superman rescuing Lois. She's rescuing him in so many ways and teaching him about humanity. I just think his natural inclination is to go with the strong female character or hire the female department head, even if it's in departments that traditionally were male. He sees that that's really important.
As Deborah just said, Gorgo was not originally a character with a large presence in the source material. The expanded dimension to her story further exemplifies Zack's reverence for powerful, strong women. When Leonidas hits a make-or-break crossroad of either submitting to a messenger from Xerxes or starting a war, he seeks her approval before taking action. He values her input, especially when he is uncertain about what his next move should be.
Instead, ask yourself, my dearest love, what should a free man do?
Despite how much of this film focuses on the action of men, particularly in combat, Gorgo has significant agency as a character and gets in on the action in her own way. But we'll be circling around to discuss that further in the remaining 2 sections of this video. It's also fitting that even though Leonidas is the main character of the film, in his final moments she is the one he calls out to.
My queen! My wife. My love.
So if we're done measuring dicks, can you have your people show me what you found?
Lois Lane is a force to be reckoned with. She is sharp as a tack, will fearlessly go into any location or situation, no matter how dangerous, if she is in pursuit of a story or if she feels the situation calls for it. She goes to the Canadian Arctic to investigate the recent discovery of a Kryptonian scout ship, follows a mysterious figure into that ship, and survives an attack from an alien security protocol, goes around her boss Perry to get her story published when he says no, tracks her mystery man down after he saved her life, and her ability to find him should not be undervalued.
How do you find someone who has spent a lifetime covering his tracks?
Once she finds him, we learn that there is more to her than her tough exterior. She also has tremendous integrity and heart. After learning the tragic story of how he lost his Earth father, Jonathan Kent, she decides to stop pursuing the story of exposing his secret identity to the world.
Thank you
For what?
for believing in me.
Didn't make much difference in the end.
It did to me.
Lois doesn't hesitate to follow Cal onto the ship when Feora says that General Zod wants her to come too. As a matter of fact, she volunteers.
It's all right. I'll go.
Despite having zero knowledge of what awaits her on board this ship, or any of the powers, physical strength, or combat skills of the Kryptonians she is surrounded by, she ends up figuring out what to do with the key she was given, perfectly follows the instructions given to her by the Jor-El AI, and ultimately ends up being the one with the knowledge of how to stop the Kryptonians from destroying the planet.
I know how to stop them.
The market of blockbusters has been saturated with stories about male superheroes for some time now, and to say that this version of Lois Lane is a breath of fresh air to the sea of female leads of these films that have time and time again been lacking in substance of character and story would be an understatement. Even in the end, when our hero breaks down from the greatest trauma he has experienced in his life thus far, she is his rock to keep him steady. She also delivers the most stellar line conceivable to put a bow on the first chapter of Cal's origin story as a refugee on the path to become one of the greatest heroes the world has ever seen.
Welcome to the planet.
Jumping ahead to Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, Lois Lane yet again is absolutely essential to the story. Her intelligence, bravery, and heart are all on display just like before. Regardless of her lack of superpowers or fancy tech, she completely holds her own. Her story begins in a fictional country in Africa where a mission goes wrong, people end up dead, and after she returns home, she discovers a stray bullet lodged in her journal. She follows this lead and discovers that this bullet is not sold anywhere commercially in the world, or even on the black market. She then goes to DC to follow that lead further.
Never seen a medal like this.
She confronts General Swanwick about the bullet, and when she determines that he doesn't know about it, she gives it to him so he may use his connections to discover its origins, and this is how she first realizes who is the mastermind of both the destruction that left multiple people dead in the desert and jump-started this new wave of anti-Superman rhetoric.
What company?
LexCorp.
Lex Luthor.
She goes on to figure out even more of Lex's crimes by visiting Wallace's apartment, where she determines that he didn't know that he was going to die, and that Lex lined the inside of the wheelchair with lead so Superman would not be able to see the bomb that was hidden inside of it. When Clark is too weak to communicate to Bruce clearly, she is the one that explains in no uncertain terms why he said that name.
It's his mother's name! It's his mother's name!
She further explains about Lex hiding out in the Kryptonian scout ship, throws away the spear because it's dangerous, and then figures out all on her own that they will need that spear to defeat Doomsday and goes after it herself. Lois Lane might not be the one who gets her name in the title, but there is never any doubt that she is a crucial character in the story. What was most surprising to find about her material after rewatching all of Zack's films in close succession to make this video is how Clark saying goodbye to her parallels the end of 300. These women are goddesses to the heroes that love them.
I love you.
My queen! My wife. My love.
You are my world.
It had been a long time coming for the world to finally see Wonder Woman on the big screen, and when Diana Prince finally arrived in BVS, she was everything we had been waiting for and more. She's beautiful and mysterious, but the mystery gradually starts to reveal itself over the course of the film. She first steals Bruce's drive and makes a quick getaway. When he later confronts her about it, the layers to this scene are deliciously thrilling to watch. He thinks he can intimidate her because he is used to being the biggest, strongest person in the room, and he's also used to knowing something significant that no one else does, that he is the masked vigilante known as Batman. However, in this situation, he has absolutely no idea who he is dealing with.
Oh, I don't think you've ever known a woman like me.
When he finally starts to figure out who she is and lets her know about it, she decides to leave. At this point, her goal is to keep a low profile and not get involved with the fights of mankind for reasons that we would have seen play out on the big screen if a select group of executives hadn't forced Queen Patty Jenkins to change the ending of her first Wonder Woman film. Diana's bags are packed and she is ready to leave, but once she sees the boys fighting Doomsday, she knows they don't stand a chance without her because
Just you get it done.
little Bruce Wayne is about to get roasted until she shows up to save him, and it's one of the most satisfying character arrivals in any blockbuster ever. Zack Snyder had been perfecting the artistry of his action sequences for a good decade before he made this scene, and then he let her loose to fight Doomsday like no one else in this story could. Not Batman, and not Superman. Zack took care not to overly explain her character or where she came from. He left that open for Patty Jenkins to tell the origin story she wanted to tell. And this was a much better debut for Wonder Woman on the big screen. Characters like Superman and Batman have headlined films time and time again, but Wonder Woman has been deprived of the opportunity to even appear in one for decades. Zack jumped straight to the point of her already knowing how to handle herself in a battle, so we got to see her in all her glory, fighting a monster with zero doubt that she can beat him.
My world.
I've killed things from other worlds before.
This was the debut Wonder Woman and all of her fans deserved. But best of all, it was only the beginning of all the incredible things we would see her do.
Councilmen, I stand before you not only as your queen, I come to you as a mother.
Over the years, it has become increasingly apparent how important mothers are to Zack Snyder's stories. I don't mean this in the archaic sense of claiming that women only exist to be mothers. It's about emphasizing how important mothers are to shaping who their children become, and having empathy for mothers who face enormous challenges in determining how to best take care of their children. When Leonidas is just a young boy, only 7 years old to be exact, he is taken away to be plunged into a world of violence and be trained as a fighter. There is a lingering shot of his mother being held back from going after him. Considering how much of the film's screen time focuses on Leonidas, and as an adult no less, this moment should be appreciated. This is clearly something that was important to Zack, or else it would not have been shot and included in the final cut. He gave Leonidas' mother a moment for the audience to connect with her and empathize with the pain she feels at having to be separated from her son, even if this separation is necessary, according to the social conventions of the time, and for him to receive the training he will need to become King of Sparta.
What makes this woman think she can speak among men?
Because only Spartan women give birth to real men.
Later, when Leonidas leaves with his 300 men to go fight, Gorgo is left to fend for herself in the midst of all the political scheming among the lead figureheads of Sparta. Along the way, she has multiple run-ins with Theron, one of which involves him making a not-so-thinly veiled threat to not only her, but her son.
You should keep a better eye on him if he's to be king one day. It'd be unfortunate if anything were to happen to him. Or to his beautiful mother.
This is an important moment of building up the tension and stakes for Gorgo in her story arc and the escalation of her conflict with Theron specifically. Mothers are central figures in the DCEU. Zack Snyder jump-started this motif, and other DCEU films that have come afterwards have continued to emphasize how important mothers are to the larger-than-life characters that we will become emotionally invested in over the course of these stories. All of this begins with the mother of Kal-El, Laura, giving birth to him and struggling with the decision she and Jor-El have made to send him away from their dying planet of Krypton. Immediately, we connect to her pain over not being able to see her son grow up.
We'll never get to see him walk. Never hear him say our names.
She is concerned that he will be treated like an outcast and be seen as a freak by the people of Earth. When the moment finally comes to send him off, Jor-El is preoccupied with fighting off General Zod, who has arrived to try to stop them and get back the Codex. She is the one that presses the button to launch the ship and send Kal away despite her having struggled with the idea of doing so.
I can't do it. I thought I could, but
Laura.
not it is here.
Though Laura is not the mother of Kal that is most frequently brought up in the larger discourse of Zack Snyder's work in jumpstarting the DCEU, her contribution to his hero's journey should never be overlooked.
His name is Kal, son of El. And he's beyond your reach. Think a better world than ours, Kal.
After Kal reaches Earth, we get to meet his second mother, Martha Kent. She is a shining example of what a mother should be, and does not get nearly enough credit for how well she does at parenting Clark when she knows absolutely nothing about Krypton or Kryptonians. She teaches him to hone his senses when he's having a panic attack from the sensory overload of his powers.
How can I help you if you won't let me in?
The world's too big, Mom.
Then make it small.
She later opens up to Clark, and by extension the audience, about her struggles to raise him. When he was a baby, she would listen to him in his crib, struggling to breathe, presumably because he had not adapted to the Earth's environment yet, and she would worry about him all the time. We see both of his mothers worry, as all they want is for their son to be happy, healthy, and free to live his life without all of these dangers that are beyond their control.
I'm worried they'll take you away from me.
I'm not going anywhere, Mom.
Martha Kent is exemplary in every way. She gives her love unconditionally to a child that is not only adopted, but from another planet entirely. There is no judgment or fear of the other projected onto him for being different from people born on Earth.
No. The truth about you is beautiful.
Despite her being, by any other standard, an ordinary woman living on a farm in Kansas, she still doesn't cower when threatened by militant Kryptonians who descend on her farm in search of the Codex.
Where is it?
Go to hell.
The stress of such extraordinary circumstances, an alien attack destroying her home and threatening the life of both her and her son, could prove to be too much for a person to bear. But Martha Kent has enough wisdom to not be broken by any of this.
It's only stuff, Clark. It can always be replaced.
But you can't be.
The opening of BVS shows the traumatic origins of the masked vigilante Batman. Young Bruce Wayne is out with his parents when a man with a gun attacks. Though Thomas Wayne is the first to be shot, it is ultimately Martha who is the first to die. His father's final word is her name.
Martha.
We then immediately jump ahead in time to when Kal-El is battling General Zod, with the fate of the entire planet on the line. There is a colossal amount of destruction that results in casualties, including the mother of a young girl whom Bruce saves from being crushed by a building. Combine his own unresolved trauma about the violent death of his mother, a young girl who has just lost her own mother, and a refugee to scapegoat, and we have a perfect recipe for xenophobia. When you see both Bruce and Clark's stories playing out in BVS, you see how significant both of their mothers are to their actions. When Clark is sad, scared, and uncertain, he calls his mother and later pays her a visit. She advises him to the best of her ability about how he can be the hero that the world needs, or to not take on that responsibility. Either way, she will still accept him.
You don't owe this world a thing. You never did.
Martha Kent is still around to provide her son with unconditional love and support. Bruce, however, is still suffering from nightmares and decades of festering trauma. The only person he has in his life that is even remotely close to being a maternal figure is Alfred. And to give credit where credit is due, Alfred offers up very insightful input about the dark, hateful path Bruce is currently on.
That's how it starts. The fever, the rage, the feeling of powerlessness that turns good men cruel.
But Alfred is not Bruce's mother or father. He works for Bruce. His words of wisdom don't hold the same sway over Bruce's actions. Lex Luthor kidnaps Martha Kent to force Superman to fight Batman in what he hopes will be to his own death. But just when it seems like Bruce is too far gone, lost to his own toxic hate, one name changes the tide.
Save Martha!
This is why Zack Snyder opened the film the way that he did. Only Superman's mother could make him fight another hero, albeit one that has lost his way, and only Batman's mother could make him realize just how far he has fallen. In that moment, he sees that the person he is hating is a person who loves his mother enough to beg for her to be saved in what might be his final moments. He is calling out for her just like his father did right before he died. It forces him to empathize with the alien refugee he blamed for deaths and destruction that were beyond either of their control. It's also an incredibly healing moment for him, because even though he couldn't save his own mother, Martha Wayne, he can save Superman's mother, Martha Kent.
I make you a promise. Martha won't die tonight. It's okay. I'm a friend of your son's.
However, despite these two being the most discussed mothers of this film, or perhaps even all of Zack Snyder's filmography, there is another mother that warrants a moment in the spotlight of this part of my video.
Mrs. Santos, may I ask you a few questions?
She is a newly single mother whom Clark encounters while investigating the vigilantism of Batman, and more specifically his habit of branding criminals with his mark. This mark has become a death sentence to any criminals who end up behind bars with it on them, as their fellow inmates will take it upon themselves to finish what Batman started permanently. In rewatching BVS, this exchange stood out to me, not only because I was preparing to write a video essay with a section that would focus on the repeated presence and importance of mothers in Zack Snyder's filmography, it also stood out to me because of what Deborah Snyder recently revealed about a scene that will be restored in Zack Snyder's Justice League, in which Victor Stone, Cyborg, tries to help a single mother in need.
Not that I want to ruin anything, but there's one scene that is my favorite, and it made me cry the first time Zach showed me the rough cut, where you see that he has this great access to everything, right? And he sees everything, and he sees this one mother who's struggling, and he makes this decision, to help her. And he, she's a single mom. She can't afford, she gets evicted from her house. She, isn't, she's not doing really well. She's trying her best to hang on, and he helps her by, kind of depositing some money in her bank account, which makes the world of a difference. It's just this really heartfelt, moment that you see. He has such a big heart. There's a whole section where you kind of get a lot of his backstory and a few things he does. You see that he, has this amazing heart, but yet the way he looks on the outside, and he also, he turns away from just helping this mom, and he has his hoodie on, and it's raining and it's dark, and there's a couple, and they're kind of afraid of him, and it's this, weird juxtaposition between what just happened. And I like it. I can't wait for everyone to see that.
This parallel between Superman's empathy for this single mother and Cyborg's empathy for another single mother will be truly exquisite to behold. Before we get into the analysis of this part of Zack Snyder's filmography, I feel it is important to use this platform to highlight a 2017 New York Times op-ed piece written by Sarah Polley, the first leading woman of Zack Snyder's feature films. In this piece, entitled "The Men You Meet Making Movies," she details the traumatic experience of being a working actress in the industry. Not only does she share about an encounter with Harvey Weinstein, she speaks about how pervasive the violation and subjugation of women has been for her entire career. This is a large reason why she backed away from acting jobs in favor of writing, directing, and producing. I've linked the piece in the description box along with the other citations and references for this video essay. Don't forget to read it after you've finished watching this video. Zack Snyder's films have more than once displayed a deep insight into an extremely insidious dynamic that occurs when people feel entitled to women's bodies and have the means to force that access through things like coercion, intimidation, or brute strength. Ronan Farrow's exposé on Harvey Weinstein wasn't published until late in 2017, but Zack Snyder was publicly addressing this problem as early as 300. When Gorgo is attempting to navigate the political bureaucracy in Sparta to get more soldiers sent to help Leonidas and his small batch of warriors, she is advised to recruit Theron as an ally to better her chances of convincing the council.
What does a realist want with his queen?
I think you know.
Gorgo chooses to trade her body so that Theron will help her, but when he reneges on the deal, lies about their exchange, and degrades her, she gives him exactly what he deserves.
This will not be over quickly. You will not enjoy this. I am not your queen.
Trying to neatly summarize Sally Jupiter's story as it pertains to the topic at hand is no easy feat. Watchmen is an incredibly dense, layered story, especially when you watch the ultimate cut, which is over 3.5 hours in length. To try to make a long story short, Watchmen was a film that dove into deconstructing superheroes long before the market was saturated enough for newcomers to the material to understand the idea that perhaps people who hide their faces and enact violent vigilante justice might not have our best interest in mind. It's a subversion of the assumption most viewers have going into viewing a big-budget superhero film that the heroes are aspirational beacons of ideals we hope to emulate. Therefore, many of the so-called superheroes in Watchmen are shown to do a number of ethically dubious things. In particular, this is the case for the comedian, portrayed by Jeffrey Dean Morgan. In a scene that is far too intense and graphic to show uncensored in a YouTube video, he makes a pass at Sally Jupiter and refuses to back off when she tells him no. She punches him, and he violently physically assaults her before being attacked by Hooded Justice in retaliation for that violent assault of Sally. Despite this, sometime later in Sally's life, she willingly hooked up with the comedian one time, resulting in her becoming pregnant with her daughter and eventual Silk Spectre predecessor, Laurie Jupiter. The story is dark and complicated. People don't always do the right or rational thing. Through a modern lens, Sally's actions seem baffling, but even if I use Hollywood media and the darker actions of its legends from decades past, it becomes more apparent just how realistic this story in Watchmen is. There are so many men who were glorified as heroes in the public eye that did horrific things to women. Hell, some of them still are kept on that pedestal to this day. I don't deny that Sally's story is tragic and hard to watch, particularly if you yourself are still dealing with the trauma from being assaulted. What I do appreciate about this material, though, is how empathetic it is to Sally. Women are not given the opportunity often enough to be flawed, to do the quote-unquote wrong thing, while still being treated with empathy by the narrative, especially in big Hollywood films.
I don't know, I just felt ashamed. I felt stupid.
It doesn't matter.
There is so much shame people feel when they are victims of assault because we are all conditioned to believe that it's wrong to be a victim. We shame people for having a so-called victim mentality. You will hear unempathetic parents say they don't want to raise their children to be a victim. There is no shame in being a victim. And Watchmen shows that victims should be treated with empathy and kindness.
I just want you to know that you never did anything wrong by me.
It should be noted that when Zack Snyder has created original films, free from the jumpstart of a pre-existing IP, he has put women at the forefront of his stories and championed them to fight back against the systemic violence we have to face simply for existing. In his short film, Snow, Steam, Iron, he showcased his frequent collaborator, Samantha Wynn, who is both an actress and a trained martial artist, to fight back against the men who wish to both do her harm and punish her for fighting back to protect herself. It's not a stretch to see how similar this short film's narrative is to the numerous stories of women being convicted and sent to prison for killing the men that have committed domestic violence against them. A very similar concept is used to jumpstart the most underrated film in Zack Snyder's filmography. Sucker Punch is a story about survivors. Released in 2011, it was bizarrely condemned by many as being sexist or objectifying women when the film was actually calling out sexism, particularly in regards to how it manifests in geek culture and genre entertainment media. I am firmly of the belief that had this film been released after Ronan Farrow published his expose on Harvey Weinstein and the larger Me Too movement exploded in and out of Hollywood, that Sucker Punch would not have been as badly misunderstood as it was. Sucker Punch's only real mistake was arriving 6 years too early. The theatrical cut was 1 hour and 49 minutes, rated PG-13, and an extended R-rated cut was released on DVD that added 18 minutes of footage. That is the version I will be using for this section. However, Zack Snyder's true Sucker Punch, as he originally intended, has yet to be restored and released. Sucker Punch opens like a fairy tale, but one in its original dark and twisted form. We meet our protagonist, Baby Doll, whose mother has just died. Her mother leaves everything to Baby Doll and her younger sister, enraging their stepfather, who attacks Baby Doll and then turns his attentions on her sister when Baby Doll fights back. Violence ensues and Baby Doll's sister is killed. The stepfather frames Baby Doll for this crime and she is taken away to an asylum where he has bribed an orderly named Blue Jones to get her lobotomized so she won't be able to reveal the truth about what he did. Blue Jones is able to do this by forging the signature of the asylum's psychiatrist, Vera Gorski. One of the recurring things we see in Sucker Punch is the power of imagination and the use of imagination as a coping mechanism. Anyone can daydream and imagine a life that is better than the one they have, but it takes on a much more significant meaning when the people imagining themselves in different circumstances are people that are processing their own trauma. Perhaps they are disassociating without meaning to because their brain is trying to find a way to compartmentalize what they have or are going through. Or perhaps they're just seeking a bit of escapism that will offer a reprieve from their pain. Baby Doll arrives at the asylum and immediately begins to imagine herself as a new dancer in a brothel-esque club. The colors become more vibrant, there is music, but this distorted dream version of what she is doing in the asylum is not only there for the audience to have a more glittery aesthetic to look at, it also serves as a vehicle for the deeper themes that the story is addressing. Baby Doll is instructed to dance, and each time she does, we never see her dancing. Instead, we see her dreams within her dreams. She does all kinds of extraordinary things like fighting monsters and slaying a dragon. It's also symbolic of the depth and layers of her character. When she dances for the first time and emerges from her dream within a dream, we cut to the main villain of her story in the asylum, Blue Jones. His expression is shaken, bewildered, and disturbed. It speaks to how these types of predatory men are threatened by strong women who own their bodies, autonomy, and sexuality. When he is first introduced, we hear him refer to the practice of women acting out their traumas in therapy as a show.
It's really quite a show watching them act out who touch them or beat them or whatever.
He is a villain that delights in observing and inflicting pain and trauma, fueled by his sadistic misogyny. The majority of the men in this story either directly inflict violence against women or are complacent to the normalization of that culture. But Blue Jones is the worst of the worst. He is a man who sees women as objects that he feels entitled to own and violate.
The girls and you are mine. Makes me feel like I'm this little boy sitting in the corner of the sandbox while everybody gets to play with my toys.
It is far too rare that an ensemble of women gets to act with one another in an action blockbuster. The solidarity and sisterhood in this group takes on a much more significant weight when you see them looking out for one another because they are the only ones that understand the horror of fighting every day to survive under the thumbs of abusive men.
I teach them to survive. You.
She had a knife to his throat. She saved me.
Watching the way these girls bond over the course of the film felt uncomfortably parallel to an excerpt from Sarah Polley's op-ed that I previously mentioned in this video. Several years ago, I approached a couple of successful female actors in Hollywood about an idea I had for a comedy project. We would write, direct, and star in a short film about the craziest, worst experience we'd ever had on a set. We told our stories to one another, thinking they would be hysterically funny. We were full of zeal for this project, but the stories, when we told them, left us in tears and bewildered at how casually we had taken these horror stories and tried to make them into comedy. They were stories of assault. When they were spoken out loud, it was impossible to reframe them any other way. This is how we'd normalized the trauma, tried to integrate it, by making comedy out of it. We abandoned the film, but not the project of unearthing the weight of these stories, which we'd previously hidden from ourselves. Even on a good day, big studio blockbusters are subjected to corporate meddling. All professional artists have to deal with the clash between their own creative vision and the corporate figures that offer funding and resources to produce and distribute their works. Sucker Punch was no different in this regard. In the extended cut, there is a scene right before Baby Doll is lobotomized in which she meets the high roller of her dream sequence, played by Jon Hamm, and things start to smolder. However, I was completely unprepared for the cavalcade of emotions that shot through me when I found an interview quote from Emily Browning that explained what happened in the lead up to this scene being removed from the theatrical cut. I had a very tame and mild love scene with Jon Hamm. I think it's great for this young girl to actually take control of her own sexuality. Well, the MPAA doesn't like that. They don't think a girl should ever be in control of her own sexuality because they're from the Stone Age. So essentially, they got Zack to edit the scene and make it look less like she's into it. And Zack said he edited it down to the point where it looked like he was taking advantage of her. That's the only way he could get a PG-13 rating. And he said, I don't want to send that message. So they cut the scene. Zack Snyder made Sucker Punch to challenge the audience about how normalized misogynistic ideals were in the entertainment industry and society in general, but the vast majority of us have no idea how far this film was supposed to go. It's an abstract, cerebral work of art critiquing misogyny that I would love to dive deeper into analyzing and discussing in the future, preferably after Zack's original vision for it is restored. The final thing I want to express my deep appreciation for is the way Sucker Punch shows how capable survivors are, even in everyday existence. When we emerge from the dream world, Baby Doll is revealed to have spent her final week of life before she was lobotomized, fighting like hell. She fought back until the very end, against the horrors she was subjected to.
Just 1 week here, she stabbed an orderly, started a fire, and helped another patient to escape.
The ending tells us that no matter how much time we have, we are heroic when we fight back against the systemic misogyny that plagues our world.
Did you lose your fight? Huh?
No. I just found it.
Surviving is not how we end. It is only the beginning. This video did not cover every iconic woman in Zack Snyder's filmography. My aim was to be more concise with making my points and presenting examples from across his body of work. And yet, I still ended up with a 10-page script. I also didn't end up using Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, although I did rewatch it when I was going through and rewatching all of the films that Zack has directed. The animation on that film is gorgeous though, and has held up incredibly well after a decade. If you missed it the first time around, I would highly recommend that you go back and watch it. The only reason I didn't end up using it in this video is that the story wasn't really relevant to the points that I wanted to make in this video. I would really like for more people to start hyping up Sucker Punch. Even my mother, who is not particularly big on getting into in-depth film analysis like me, she really liked Sucker Punch. Let's consider this video essay my formal application to both Zack and Deborah Snyder, whom I would both love to interview at some point. They have an open invitation to come on my channel anytime they would like to. Clearly, there are a lot of things that I would love to discuss in depth with them. And don't worry, I also brought a reference.
A working class actor wrote a piece about why is it that the working class accents are only messengers, or...
Was it Christopher Eccleston?
Yes, it was. Yes.
See, I pay attention to this stuff. This is why I knew we could get along.
Yeah, you're brilliant because yes.
See, the queen herself, Karen Bryson, Mama Stone, thinks I am brilliant. It's incredible to think that this video essay is finally finished because I've been working on this for months, and that's only talking about the writing process and the editing process. We're not even getting into how many months this video essay has been brewing in my mind, all of the ideas that I had floating around that I needed to finally write down and organize so then I could turn it into what it is that you've just watched. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to like and comment because engagement is fundamental. Subscribe for all of the new content I will be making in 2021 and follow my social media pages where I rant on a regular basis about very important things like how Grease 2 is the superior Grease film. One of these days, all of you are going to give Patricia Birch the respect that she deserves.
So that's the way it's gonna be now, huh, Miss Independent?
Yeah, independent. I kiss who I want, when I want.